What if the most explosive royal secrets were never buried, never hidden behind palace walls or carefully curated photo ops, but instead were just lying in wait, hidden in a vault, on a yacht, in a video clip no one was supposed to see? Imagine the headlines. Imagine the frenzy. Imagine two names. Names that alone are enough to set gossip columns on fire. Suddenly linked in a story so unexpected, so shocking, that it leaves even the most seasoned royal watchers questioning everything they thought they knew. Tonight, we are going to explore one of those stories. A story that is not just about presence, but about proximity. Not just about footage, but about perception. Not just about the past, but about how one video, one revelation, can rip open narratives carefully crafted over decades. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The footage, now circulating through channels that thrive on curiosity and outrage, allegedly shows Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew at the same yacht party. A seemingly innocent detail? Perhaps. Or perhaps the spark that sets off a conflagration that the royal family, the media, and history itself cannot ignore. But before we get to the footage, before we even speculate on its contents, we need to understand the stage on which this drama unfolds. And it begins with one man, Tom Bower, investigative journalist, biographer, and perhaps the single most feared chronicler of the royal family's private lives. Why does Tom Bower evoke such strong reactions? Because he does not write fluff pieces. He does not offer glowing tributes. He uncovers, he interrogates, he reveals. His work has toppled reputations, challenged narratives, and provoked anger from the corridors of power. When Bower publishes, people do not just read, they react. They panic. They try to prevent, to negotiate, to beg. And now, his latest revelations have allegedly triggered a response that is as dramatic as the footage itself. But what is it about Bower that makes him so dangerous? Perhaps it is the combination of meticulous research, fearless storytelling, and a knack for choosing his targets with surgical precision. Perhaps it is the fact that he refuses to bow to the influence of titles, wealth, or proximity to power. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The real shock does not come from the man writing the story. It comes from what is in the story and what the story implies. Because when two names that are already loaded with public fascination appear together in a context like this, the possibilities for interpretation explode. And that is where curiosity becomes obsession, where speculation becomes accusation, where the difference between fact and perception blurs into a fog so thick, even the most seasoned observers cannot see clearly. Now, let's frame this in the context of timing. Why does this story matter now? Why does a single piece of footage, allegedly from years ago, suddenly demand global attention? Timing, as always, is everything. We live in an era where the past is never past, where social media ensures that a decade-old event can trend worldwide in a matter of hours. Platforms that thrive on controversy amplify even the smallest detail into an international spectacle. One image, 1 second of video, one unverified account can spiral into a media storm that engulfs reputations, fuels arguments, and reshapes public perception. And in this case, the storm may have started before the footage even became public. To understand the gravity, consider the layers. First, the individuals involved. Prince Andrew, a figure whose every public action has been scrutinized, debated, and dissected, often with damning intensity. Meghan Markle, a woman whose transition from Hollywood actress to royal figure invited scrutiny of almost every choice, every appearance, every interaction. Both are polarizing figures, each carrying histories, controversies, and legacies that make them magnets for public attention. Place them in proximity to one another, at a time and location already steeped in intrigue, the yacht party, and you have a story with the potential to ignite curiosity on a global scale. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Footage alone does not tell a story. It is context that gives it meaning. And context is slippery. It shifts depending on who observes it, who interprets it, who amplifies it. What is a casual social gathering to some becomes, in the court of public opinion, a scandal to others. What is a fleeting appearance in one frame of video becomes, in viral narratives, proof of intent, connection, or complicity. The ambiguity itself becomes a weapon. And in this story, ambiguity is the central character. Think about the ethical tension here. Journalism thrives on exposure, revelation, accountability. But at what cost? How much of what emerges is truth, and how much is perception? How often do we mistake proximity for participation and appearance for action? The power of a single video is not in what it shows. It is in what it provokes. And that provocation, in turn, reshapes not only the lives of the individuals depicted, but also the narratives that surround them, the public conversations that swirl endlessly, and the very way history is recorded. Let's take a moment to consider the human element. Behind every headline, every clip, every whispered speculation, there are people reacting. Panic, concern, anger, attempted damage control. Allegedly, the emergence of this footage prompted both Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, or their representatives, to reach out to Bauer, seeking control, clarification, or perhaps suppression. What did those interactions look like? What was said? What was feared? The answers, as you might expect, are cloaked in secrecy. But the mere suggestion that figures of such prominence were compelled to act speaks volumes. It hints at the stakes, the sensitivity, the potential for fallout. Yet the story is far from linear. It unfolds across multiple dimensions. The timeline of events, the emergence of footage, the reactions of those implicated, the media coverage, the social media amplification, and, ultimately, the public interpretation. Each layer adds complexity, tension, and a new set of questions. Who is shaping the narrative? Who is responding reactively? And perhaps most importantly, what might still be hidden, just beyond the frame, in a clip, in a conversation, in an unpublished note? As we begin to peel back these layers, one thing becomes clear. This is not merely a story about a yacht, a party, or a single piece of footage. It is a story about control, control of narrative, control of perception, control of history. And the stakes are enormous, not only for those directly implicated, but for everyone who consumes, shares, or interprets the story. Because once the footage exists, once the allegations are whispered, once curiosity takes hold, there is no going back. And that brings us to the question that haunts every angle of this narrative. What is the truth, and does it even matter? In the court of public opinion, perception often outweighs reality. A single frame can overshadow decades of action. A rumor can eclipse documentation. And the audience, us, the watchers, the commentators, the consumers of controversy, plays an unwitting role in the amplification. What we choose to focus on, discuss, and share becomes part of the story itself. But the real shock, the real tension, is not in the footage itself. It is in the response. Because as whispers of the video began circulating, the reactions allegedly escalated far beyond what anyone anticipated. Urgent calls, messages, legal warnings, some say even pleas, entered the narrative, suggesting a level of concern that only heightened curiosity. What was it that prompted such urgency? What did the parties fear would be revealed, and what consequences loomed on the horizon? These questions are what keep people watching, reading, and speculating. As we move forward into the chapters that follow, we will examine each component in detail. We will analyze the man behind the revelations, the context of the footage, the timeline of appearances, the reactions, and the implications. We will explore the fine line between proximity and participation, between perception and fact, and between curiosity and judgment. And throughout, we will ask you, the viewer, the reader, to confront your own assumptions, to question your own interpretations, and to consider how quickly you assign meaning to what you see. Because what the footage allegedly shows is only part of the story. The more dangerous part, the part that fuels obsession, speculation, and panic, is the uncertainty, the unknown. And the reactions to that unknown, as we will uncover, tell a story just as revealing, just as dramatic, and just as compelling as the footage itself. And so, as we stand at the precipice of this narrative, we must ask ourselves, how much do we really know, and how much do we think we know? Because once the layers are peeled back, once the timeline is reconstructed, once the context is explored, there is no undoing the questions that emerge. The footage is only the beginning. The reactions are only the tip of the iceberg. And the consequences, some seen, some unseen, may redefine everything we thought we understood about proximity, perception, and power. What would you do if you knew someone was about to uncover secrets that powerful people have spent decades hiding? Imagine the fear, the panic, the urgent phone calls, the whispers behind closed doors. For many, the mere mention of Tom Bower's name is enough to ignite anxiety in the corridors of power. He is not just a biographer. He is a force of nature, a chronicler who has made a career out of peeling back layers of public facades to reveal the human flaws beneath. And in the world of royalty, celebrity, and influence, that is a dangerous occupation. Bower's reputation is both respected and feared. Respected because his research is meticulous, his sources credible, his storytelling compelling. Feared because his findings do not spare anyone, no matter how high-profile or powerful. When Bower publishes, people take notice. They argue, they deny, they strategize, and sometimes they beg. And yet, despite the backlash, Bower's books consistently dominate headlines, provoke debate, and spark revelations that often feel more shocking than fiction. Consider his approach. Bower does not rely solely on anecdotes or rumor. He digs. He cross-references. He verifies. He interviews witnesses, scours public records, and pieces together fragments of information that, when combined, create narratives impossible to ignore. The power of his writing comes not just from what is revealed, but from how it is revealed. Each detail is contextualized, each claim carefully sourced, each contradiction examined. There is a logic to his chaos, a method to his exposure, and a relentless drive that makes his work both riveting and dangerous. But why does the world react so intensely to Bower? Part of it is fear of exposure. Powerful individuals, politicians, businessmen, celebrities, even members of royal families, understand that their carefully curated images are fragile. One sentence, one paragraph, one verified claim can unravel years of public persona. And Bower has proven time and again that he has the skill, patience, and audacity to do exactly that. Bower's work has never shied away from controversy. His books have scrutinized figures such as Prince Charles, Elizabeth Taylor, and other household names. In each case, his revelations prompted a spectrum of reactions: denial, outrage, legal threats, and, occasionally, grudging acknowledgement of accuracy. But one thing is consistent. Bower's subjects often find themselves scrambling to control the narrative, trying to negotiate with the storyteller rather than face the truths laid bare. And that dynamic is part of what makes his work so compelling. The stakes rise even higher when Bower turns his attention to members of the royal family. In a world where discretion is currency and image is everything, a revelation from someone like Bower is akin to a spark in a powder keg. It triggers panic, speculation, and defensive maneuvers. Staffers, advisors, and even family members become actors in a drama that no one scriptwriter could have anticipated. Calls are made. Meetings are held. Emails are sent. All in the hope of containing the ripple effects before they reach the public eye. And that brings us to the latest chapter in Bower's career, the alleged yacht footage linking Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. The public may never know the full details of Bower's sources or the extent of his findings until the book is released, but the mere suggestion that such evidence exists has already created ripples. According to reports, the emergence of this footage prompted urgent reactions from both Meghan and Andrew, or at least their representatives. Messages, pleas, and perhaps even attempts at preemptive negotiation were reportedly sent in the wake of Bower's work. It is important to understand what this dynamic tells us about influence and perception. Bower's work does not just inform, it pressures. It forces responses. And in doing so, it creates a secondary story. The story of how the powerful react when confronted with evidence that threatens their narrative. Sometimes, this response is more revealing than the evidence itself. The fear, the urgency, the attempts to manage perception, all of it becomes part of the unfolding drama. But what is it about Bower that makes people so willing to reach out before a book is even published? Part of it is his track record. He has consistently uncovered truths that others missed or ignored. He has demonstrated a capacity to take seemingly minor details and, through diligent research and narrative construction, turn them into revelations that shift public discourse. In the context of the royal family, where image is everything and privacy is fiercely guarded, this is not a trivial threat. It is a potential earthquake. And yet, Bauer himself seems unfazed by the panic he provokes. He is methodical, precise, and singularly focused on documenting events as they happened, not as they were perceived. This is what makes him such a formidable figure. Unlike tabloids that chase clicks or sensationalize speculation, Bauer operates with a sense of purpose, anchored in evidence. His objective is not to entertain. It is to expose, to illuminate, to document. And that objective carries a weight that few can match. History is full of examples where Bauer's work has triggered immediate consequences. Previous publications have led to resignations, public apologies, and even legal scrutiny. In some cases, the backlash has been intense, but the revelations themselves have stood the test of time. His investigative rigor ensures that his narratives are difficult to dismiss outright. And in a world where influence is currency and reputation is fragile, the arrival of a Bauer publication is never trivial. It is a seismic event. So what does this mean for Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew? If Bauer's track record is any indication, the alleged footage is not merely a curiosity, it is a catalyst that has the potential to ignite discussions, provoke reactions, and perhaps even reshape public perception. The stakes are clear. Those implicated understand that once the story is public, control of the narrative shifts. And in such moments, even the most strategic actors may find themselves reacting out of fear rather than reason. The fascinating, almost terrifying, aspect of Bauer's approach is his neutrality in presentation. He does not speculate wildly. He does not embellish without evidence. Yet the clarity and precision of his work often create the very tension that fuels public intrigue. The drama emerges naturally from the facts themselves, from the contradictions, from the responses his revelations provoke. And that is why, when the news of the yacht footage surfaced, or was rumored to exist, the response was immediate and dramatic. We can infer a great deal from the reactions, even without full access to the footage. When people reach out, plead, or attempt to negotiate with a biographer of Bauer's stature, it indicates a high perceived risk. It suggests that the subject of the revelations understands the power of documentation, the permanence of publication, and the influence of public perception. These responses become part of the narrative, part of the unfolding story, and in some ways, part of the evidence itself. But Bauer's work also reminds us of another key element, the public's role in this drama. No matter how meticulous the research, no matter how precise the presentation, the ultimate interpretation lies in the hands of readers, viewers, and commentators. Every claim is filtered through perception, bias, and assumption. Every image, every line of text, every reported reaction is amplified or diminished depending on how it is consumed. In this sense, Bauer does not just write books. He orchestrates a dialogue, a collective reckoning with information that many would prefer remained hidden. And that is why the alleged footage is so consequential. Not because it proves anything definitively, but because it challenges perception, demands response, and ignites speculation. The very act of its existence creates ripples that reach beyond the yacht, beyond the individuals, beyond the immediate circle of influence. It forces engagement, reaction, and reflection. It makes the previously private suddenly public. And in doing so, it sets the stage for a story that is as much about human behavior, fear, and perception as it is about the footage itself. As we continue to unpack this narrative, keep in mind that the man behind the revelations, Tom Bauer, is not an incidental figure. He is the catalyst, the observer, and the chronicler. His methodology, his reputation, and his unflinching approach to documentation shape the entire context in which these events are interpreted. The reactions, the panic, the intrigue, all of it exists because of him, because of the evidence he has chosen to highlight, and because of the precision with which he constructs his narratives. And yet, even with Bauer's rigor, uncertainty lingers. Questions remain unanswered. Motives are debated. Context is sometimes incomplete. And that uncertainty, that tension, is exactly what keeps the story alive, what keeps the audience engaged, what keeps curiosity burning. Because in the end, the story is not just what is revealed, it is what remains to be revealed. The next chapter will take us from the biographer himself to the context of the yacht, the location, and the cultural significance of what is being discussed. But before we leave this section, consider this. The most revealing moments in any scandal are often not what appears in the public eye. They are the reactions behind the scenes, the messages sent in panic, the attempts to shape perception before the narrative is even fully formed. And in this case, those reactions may prove more dramatic than the footage itself. Imagine a scene: turquoise water stretching to the horizon, the sun blazing down on gleaming white decks, champagne glinting in crystal flutes, laughter carrying over the waves. A yacht party is meant to evoke luxury, leisure, carefree indulgence. But in the world of public perception, yacht party has become a phrase heavy with insinuation, a shorthand for scandal, secrecy, and sometimes danger. How did a place of pleasure become a lightning rod for gossip and intrigue? And why does the suggestion of a particular event, years ago, still provoke fascination and speculation today? The answer lies in the intersection of wealth, privacy, and power. Yachts are, by design, secluded. They float away from scrutiny. They allow the privileged to gather in spaces insulated from the public eye. In this context, what happens on board is shielded not only from journalists, but from casual observation. That very privacy is what makes the yacht both alluring and controversial. For the public, it is a space of curiosity, a setting for imagination to run wild. For those inside, it is a venue for leisure, but sometimes for negotiation, networking, or even conflict. Historically, yacht parties have always carried dual symbolism. Among the ultra-wealthy, they are status markers, celebrations of success, places to unwind. But in media coverage, they have frequently been cast as arenas for excess, indulgence, and occasionally, impropriety. The allure of secrecy combined with opulence creates fertile ground for speculation. A fleeting glance captured by a photographer, a single social media post, or a whispered account can become a narrative loaded with implications far beyond the reality of what actually occurred. The cultural weight of yachts in public imagination cannot be underestimated. Consider the language used by tabloids and gossip columns. Phrases like exclusive gathering, hidden away, or private deck immediately frame events as suspicious. The same setting that might host an innocent celebration is instantly cast in a dramatic light. In other words, context transforms perception. A simple yacht outing becomes a stage for intrigue, simply because the audience assumes secrecy implies wrongdoing. In the case of Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, the stakes are exponentially higher. Both figures are already enveloped in public scrutiny, and both have histories that amplify the intrigue surrounding any gathering they might attend. Place them in proximity to one another on a yacht, and suddenly the event becomes more than a party. It becomes a focal point for speculation. Every detail, the time of day, the people present, even the design of the vessel, becomes material for analysis. What did they wear? Who greeted whom? Which conversations were overheard? To the public, every nuance could suggest motive, complicity, or scandal. But it is important to remember that yachts are also practical spaces for certain kinds of elite gatherings. They allow privacy not because participants are plotting wrongdoing, but because certain discussions, business deals, or diplomatic conversations require discretion. The very same environment that fuels scandal narratives also serves legitimate purposes. And yet, in the court of public opinion, the former often overshadows the latter. The seclusion that should provide security instead magnifies suspicion. What adds fuel to the fire is timing. The yacht years, as they are sometimes called, coincided with a period when both the royal family and the public were hyper-aware of appearances. Media coverage was intense, social media chatter amplified every image, and the appetite for behind-the-scenes stories was insatiable. In this climate, even mundane interactions could be twisted into dramatic interpretations. A casual handshake could become a signal, a friendly conversation could become a negotiation. And once a narrative takes hold, it becomes remarkably difficult to separate fact from perception. There is also a psychological element at play. People are drawn to exclusivity, to places they cannot access. When ordinary citizens cannot witness the event firsthand, the imagination fills in the blanks. This is why yacht parties are repeatedly linked to speculation. They are literally and figuratively removed from the public eye. The more inaccessible an event, the more the mind seeks to understand it, often constructing a story that exaggerates intrigue or risk. In the case of the alleged footage, this psychological dynamic is compounded by the individuals involved. Prince Andrew's past controversies have already primed the public to view his proximity to certain people with suspicion. Meghan Markle's transformation from Hollywood actress to royal figure invites continuous scrutiny. When these two figures are associated with the same event, especially a yacht party, the narrative potential is enormous. What might have been a quiet social gathering is suddenly interpreted as a clandestine meeting. Every glance, every gesture, every interaction becomes material for analysis. And yet, despite all this speculation, there is always an element of ambiguity. A single frame of video can only capture so much. It cannot reveal intentions, conversations, or context. What appears in a fleeting moment can be interpreted in dozens of ways, depending on the observer's bias, prior knowledge, and assumptions. The yacht, therefore, is not just a physical location, it is a narrative device. Its meaning is shaped as much by perception as by reality. Furthermore, the symbolism of yachts extends beyond individual events. They represent a lifestyle of wealth, mobility, and influence. They are spaces where social hierarchies are displayed and reinforced, where alliances are formed, and where public visibility is deliberately limited. This combination of luxury and privacy creates a tension that is irresistible to storytellers. The very attributes that make yachts appealing to the elite, discretion, exclusivity, opulence, also make them compelling symbols of secrecy and potential scandal. Media coverage of yacht parties often amplifies these tensions. Headlines emphasize the glamour and the secrecy, while photographs, sometimes candid, sometimes staged, provide visual proof that feeds the imagination. In this way, yachts are not merely locations. They are catalysts for storytelling, symbols that convey both prestige and mystery. And when these elements intersect with figures like Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, the narrative potential multiplies exponentially. But there is another layer: history and precedent. Previous yacht gatherings involving high-profile individuals have occasionally sparked genuine controversy. Whether through financial improprieties, social conflicts, or simply being captured at an unfortunate moment, yachts have repeatedly been linked to dramatic stories. The public memory of these events primes audiences to interpret new incidents with suspicion, even in the absence of concrete evidence. In other words, the cultural weight of the yacht as a setting makes speculation almost inevitable. So when whispers of the footage emerged, it was not just the individuals involved that captured attention. It was the location itself. The yacht became a symbol, a trigger, a shorthand for intrigue. Observers did not just see a party. They saw opportunity, secrecy, and potential scandal. And that perception, whether accurate or not, set the stage for the reactions that followed. Urgent messages, media inquiries, and alleged attempts at narrative control all stem from the understanding that a yacht is more than a venue. It is a stage, a lens through which actions are magnified, analyzed, and interpreted. And yet, even as speculation swirled, the reality of the yacht party remains partially obscured. How many guests were present? What exactly occurred? Which interactions were significant? These questions remain unanswered, leaving ample room for narrative construction. The lack of clarity only heightens curiosity, fuels debate, and ensures that the story continues to resonate. The yacht is both literal and metaphorical, a place of private gathering and a symbol of public intrigue. As we continue to examine this story, it is crucial to recognize the tension between appearance and reality. The yacht, in this context, represents both. To the public, it appears as a stage for scandal. To participants, it may have been nothing more than a social event. The discrepancy between these perspectives is where the drama and the curiosity thrives. And that discrepancy is what makes the alleged footage and the reactions to it so compelling. Because here is the essential question. If a gathering is private, exclusive, and seemingly innocuous, why does it carry such power in public imagination? The answer lies in the interplay of context, perception, and the individuals involved. The yacht is a lens that magnifies every detail, every gesture, every glance. It transforms the mundane into the mysterious, the ordinary into the extraordinary. And in this story, that transformation is central to understanding both the footage and the reactions it provoked. But even as we dissect the yacht's symbolism, one fact remains undeniable. The emergence of the alleged footage did not merely spark curiosity, it prompted reaction. Urgent calls, strategic responses, and a flurry of behind-the-scenes activity reportedly followed. The individuals involved understood that what happens on a yacht, far from the public eye, can suddenly become a matter of intense scrutiny. And the stakes, in this case, were nothing short of extraordinary. What if a single frame of video could rewrite everything we thought we knew? Just a few seconds captured on camera, mere moments, fleeting glances, gestures barely noticed. And suddenly, the world is watching, debating, and speculating. That is the power of footage, particularly when it involves figures as polarizing and scrutinized as Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. The alleged yacht footage that has recently surfaced is not just a video. It is a spark, igniting conversations, headlines, and theories that no one could have anticipated. To understand its significance, we need to start with what the footage allegedly shows. Keep in mind that this is not about verified behavior or proven claims. This is about what is visible, what observers have interpreted, and the layers of perception that follow. According to sources, the video depicts both Markle and Andrew aboard the same yacht, interacting with other guests in a social context. Some frames reportedly capture proximity, fleeting exchanges, or even casual greetings. To the untrained eye, these may appear completely ordinary. But in the court of public scrutiny, ordinary gestures are rarely perceived as ordinary. The controversy begins with interpretation. Context is everything. What is a brief conversation to one viewer becomes, in speculation, a sign of familiarity, complicity, or intentional association. Who approached whom first? How long did the interaction last? Were others present? These are the questions that fuel analysis, yet they cannot always be answered definitively from a few seconds of footage. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes the video so provocative. It invites assumptions, demands narrative construction, and challenges the audience to make sense of what they see. It is also crucial to consider the framing of the video itself. Camera angles, lighting, and editing can all influence perception. A casual gesture may look deliberate. A fleeting glance may appear intentional. Even the timing of when the footage is released matters. In an era dominated by social media, video clips can be clipped, slowed, or emphasized to highlight particular interactions. The result is that a single piece of footage can convey multiple, sometimes conflicting, interpretations. And in the case of Meghan and Andrew, every nuance is scrutinized, every detail amplified, every movement analyzed for meaning. Another layer of complexity arises from prior public narratives. Andrew's past controversies, combined with Markle's high-profile media coverage, prime audiences to view their interactions with suspicion. Human psychology is wired to detect patterns, particularly patterns that confirm pre-existing beliefs. When people see these two figures together, even in the absence of wrongdoing, they are more likely to infer connections or intentions. This phenomenon, confirmation bias, is a powerful force in shaping public opinion, particularly when the evidence is ambiguous or incomplete. What makes this footage even more compelling is the question of provenance. Who recorded it? Why has it surfaced now? Was it leaked intentionally, or did it emerge through more accidental means? The answers remain uncertain, but the speculation itself adds another dimension to the story. In a world where timing and narrative control are critical, the mere act of a video surfacing can create as much drama as its content. The existence of the footage, regardless of what it shows, is enough to spark reaction, debate, and panic. This is where human behavior enters the frame. According to reports, the alleged footage prompted urgent communications from representatives of both Markle and Andrew. Some sources describe pleas, others describe attempts to clarify or negotiate. Whether these interactions were driven by concern, fear, or strategic image management, they underscore the power of the footage. A few seconds of video, floating in the ether, can provoke action from some of the most scrutinized public figures in the world. The reaction is part of the story, sometimes as telling as the footage itself. But let's examine why visual evidence carries such weight. Unlike documents, interviews, or secondhand reports, video creates an immediate, visceral impression. It is tangible, seemingly objective, and capable of conveying subtle cues, gestures, expressions, context that text alone cannot capture. Even when ambiguous, it feels real. And that realism makes it compelling, particularly to audiences who crave certainty or scandal. The footage becomes a lens through which viewers attempt to reconstruct events, often filling gaps with assumptions, inferences, or prior knowledge. There is also a social dimension. Once video emerges, it is analyzed not just by journalists, but by millions online. Clips are paused, replayed, dissected frame by frame. Screenshots are circulated with captions suggesting meaning. Commentators weigh in with theories, sometimes contradicting one another, sometimes reinforcing narratives that have already begun to take shape. The footage thus evolves from a static record into a dynamic catalyst for conversation, speculation, and even panic. Its impact grows not only from what it shows, but from how it is consumed and interpreted. And then there is the question of narrative construction. Even neutral footage is rarely treated neutrally. Outlets that cover the story will emphasize different aspects based on audience interest, editorial perspective, or sensational potential. A glance becomes a gaze, a conversation becomes a whispered meeting, a social gesture becomes a signal. The result is that a single piece of footage generates multiple competing narratives, each amplified by social media, blogs, and discussion forums. In this ecosystem, ambiguity becomes opportunity, and uncertainty fuels engagement. Let's not overlook the emotional factor. Footage, especially of public figures with complicated histories, evokes strong responses. Some viewers experience outrage, others curiosity, some disbelief, and others schadenfreude. Emotional engagement drives retention, shares, and discussion. It is the fuel that keeps stories alive. And in this case, the footage allegedly shows two individuals whose very names elicit strong reactions. The combination of visibility, controversy, and perceived significance creates a perfect storm for viral attention. Yet, despite the attention, ambiguity persists. We cannot definitively know what the footage proves. Did Meghan and Andrew interact in a meaningful way? Was there intent behind the gestures captured? Or were these ordinary moments blown up by proximity and perception? These unanswered questions sustain curiosity, keeping audiences engaged, discussing, and returning for updates. And that is precisely the mechanism that makes the story so enduring. The footage itself, combined with interpretation, speculation, and reaction, creates layers of engagement that continue long after the video first surfaces. Adding another layer, consider the ethical dimension. Footage can be misinterpreted, taken out of context, or used to manipulate perception. The responsibility for interpretation does not rest solely with the viewer. It extends to those who release, analyze, and amplify it. In this scenario, Tom Bower's role as an investigative journalist adds credibility, but also heightens scrutiny. The way footage is framed, described, or contextualized can dramatically shape public perception, regardless of the content's literal meaning. And yet, the most compelling element may not be the content itself, but the tension it generates. The footage functions as a catalyst for reaction. Reports of urgent communications, legal considerations, and behind-the-scenes negotiation are as dramatic, if not more so, than what is visible on the video. The footage sets events in motion that extend far beyond the screen, actions, decisions, and consequences that are invisible to the public eye but crucial to understanding the story. It is here, in the interplay between visibility and invisibility, between content and reaction, that the narrative becomes truly explosive. The footage is a trigger. The reactions are evidence. And the ambiguity between what is seen and what is assumed sustains curiosity, drives speculation, and compels engagement. Every second of video, every glance captured, every gesture analyzed, becomes part of a larger story about perception, power, and response. Finally, we must acknowledge the human fascination with mystery. Ambiguity attracts attention. Uncertainty sparks debate. The footage, by virtue of its existence and the reactions it provoked, ensures that the story continues to unfold. Audiences are drawn not only to what is visible, but to what remains hidden, to the questions that linger, and to the possibilities that have yet to be explored. And that brings us to the critical cliffhanger. The footage is just the beginning. What it reveals, or fails to reveal, sets the stage for the responses, the strategies, and the consequences that will follow. The next chapter will delve into Prince Andrew himself, examining why his presence in any story amplifies drama, scrutiny, and speculation. Because in this narrative, the individuals involved are as central to the story as the footage itself, and what comes next would escalate the tension to levels no one could have anticipated. What happens when a single name alone can ignite controversy, reshape conversations, and dominate headlines worldwide? For decades, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, has been that name. To some, he is a member of one of the most famous families in the world. To others, he is a symbol of scandal, misjudgment, and public intrigue. Every mention of him carries weight, loaded with history, reputation, and implication. And in the context of the yacht footage allegedly linking him and Meghan Markle, the mere mention of his name transforms curiosity into obsession. To understand why, we must start with context. Prince Andrew is not an ordinary figure. Born into royalty, he has lived his entire life under the microscope of public scrutiny. From military service to philanthropic endeavors, every action has been documented, dissected, and debated. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of, his privileged position, Andrew has been no stranger to controversy. Certain high-profile associations and decisions have repeatedly thrust him into media storms, with public perception often leaning toward suspicion rather than sympathy. The pivotal aspect of Andrew's public image is the tension between privilege and accountability. Royalty exists in a world of expectation, where actions, appearances, and even associations are subject to intense scrutiny. For Andrew, several events in recent decades have amplified this tension, casting long shadows over otherwise mundane interactions. In the court of public opinion, even proximity to questionable individuals or scenarios can be perceived as complicity. This perception is magnified in the context of the yacht footage, where presence alone is enough to spark speculation. But scrutiny alone does not explain the intensity of public reaction. Psychology plays a role. The human mind is drawn to patterns, especially patterns that confirm prior beliefs. For those aware of Andrew's past controversies, the sight of him in proximity to Meghan Markle, an already polarizing figure, sets off alarms, raises questions, and fuels speculation. Confirmation bias ensures that audiences see connections, draw inferences, and construct narratives that may have little basis in verified fact. And in the age of social media, these narratives spread with incredible speed and persistence. It is also worth noting that Andrew's behavior in public life has often been interpreted in ways that heighten scrutiny. Gestures, expressions, and appearances are analyzed frame by frame. A handshake may be read as deliberate, a smile as calculated, and casual interactions as symbolic. The Duke's visibility, combined with his historical controversies, ensures that any new evidence, or alleged evidence, receives extraordinary attention. Every interaction he has, particularly with high-profile figures, is loaded with implication. This scrutiny is not merely media-driven, it is socially reinforced. Public fascination with royalty, particularly when scandals are involved, creates a feedback loop. Outrage attracts coverage, coverage attracts engagement, and engagement amplifies outrage. The cycle is self-perpetuating. Prince Andrew's name acts as a catalyst within this cycle, triggering immediate reaction, debate, and speculation. It is a name that demands attention, whether in tabloids, social media, or casual conversation. Now consider the specific context of the alleged yacht footage. Andrew's presence transforms the scene from a private social gathering into a matter of public curiosity. Even if no inappropriate or significant interaction occurred, perception alone is enough to drive engagement. Audiences fill in gaps, constructing narratives to explain proximity, gestures, or expressions. The ambiguity of the footage allows for multiple interpretations, each shaped by prior knowledge, expectation, and bias. And because Andrew's reputation is already controversial, the default assumption leans toward intrigue. There is also the matter of timing. Andrew's public visibility has fluctuated over the years, with periods of increased attention corresponding to specific events or controversies. The emergence of the yacht footage coincides with renewed interest in royal transparency, media retrospectives, and ongoing debates about privilege and accountability. This timing ensures that the footage does not exist in isolation. It intersects with existing narratives, amplifying their impact and relevance. The result is a story that feels immediate, urgent, and compelling, even if the underlying facts remain ambiguous. It is important to distinguish between perception and reality. Andrew's presence does not inherently imply misconduct, and the footage does not necessarily reveal intent. Yet, in public discourse, perception often carries as much weight as verified information. The Duke's history, combined with his visibility and the cultural significance of yachts as private, exclusive spaces, creates a scenario where ambiguity is magnified into controversy. Audiences interpret what they see through the lens of prior knowledge, assumptions, and societal narratives, often elevating ordinary moments into extraordinary speculation. This is compounded by the fact that Andrew has long been a polarizing figure, even within the royal family. His relationships, public appearances, and media coverage have generated debate and criticism for years. Every news story involving him is filtered through the lens of prior controversies, ensuring that interpretation is rarely neutral. The yacht footage, in this context, functions less as evidence of specific actions and more as a symbol of potential intrigue, association, and scandal. The psychological impact extends beyond interpretation to emotional engagement. The public is drawn to tension, secrecy, and perceived wrongdoing. Andrew's name evokes a sense of risk and drama, which, when combined with visual evidence, even ambiguous footage, heightens emotional investment. This emotional engagement is critical in driving attention, discussion, and retention, ensuring that the story resonates far beyond those immediately involved. Consider also the interplay between Andrew's history and Markle's public perception. Both figures carry significant public interest, albeit for different reasons. Markle's transition into royalty, combined with media fascination and scrutiny, creates an environment where her actions are continuously evaluated. When juxtaposed with Andrew, the result is a story that intersects multiple narratives: royal behavior, media influence, and social interpretation. The combination amplifies curiosity, intensifies scrutiny, and sustains engagement over time. Yet, even amidst speculation, ambiguity persists. The footage alone does not provide answers. It generates questions. Why were they in the same space? How did they interact? What was said, and what was left unsaid? These questions, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable, drive curiosity, debate, and anticipation. The ambiguity itself becomes the story, compelling audiences to seek further information, interpret evidence, and speculate on motives. It is also essential to note that the reactions surrounding Andrew often reveal as much as the footage itself. Reports of urgent communications, preemptive outreach, and media strategies highlight the perceived stakes. When individuals respond quickly to potential exposure, the reaction becomes part of the narrative. The urgency underscores the weight of the evidence, real or perceived, and provides insight into how high-profile figures manage public perception. Ultimately, Prince Andrew's presence in this story serves as a magnifying lens. It intensifies scrutiny, heightens tension, and amplifies curiosity. His history, visibility, and reputation ensure that every detail, no matter how minor, receives attention. The yacht footage, ambiguous as it may be, becomes a focal point precisely because of his involvement. In public discourse, perception often supersedes fact, and Andrew's name guarantees engagement, debate, and emotional investment. And so, as we move forward, it is critical to understand that this story is not only about footage or presence. It is about perception, narrative control, and the interplay between public figures and the audiences that watch them. Prince Andrew's name changes every conversation because it carries history, controversy, and expectation. The alleged yacht footage cannot be divorced from this context. It exists within a web of meaning that shapes interpretation, reaction, and speculation. As we prepare to examine Meghan Markle's role in the unfolding story in the next chapter, remember this: The most powerful moments are often defined not by what is shown, but by what is expected. Andrew's presence primes the audience, sets the stage, and ensures that curiosity is at its peak. And what comes next, the interactions, the context, and the reactions, will escalate the drama to levels that few anticipated. Before the cameras, before the global headlines, before the scrutiny that would follow her every move, Meghan Markle was a woman navigating her own path. An actress, an advocate, and a public figure in her own right. She had cultivated a life defined by ambition, visibility, and a keen understanding of public perception. Yet, even then, Meghan's life was never as simple as it appeared. The trajectory that led her to royalty, to headlines, and now to the controversial yacht footage, began long before palace walls or royal titles ever came into play. Consider Hollywood, a world of opportunity, image, and competition. Meghan's early career was a study in perseverance and strategic navigation. Small roles led to larger ones. Guest appearances evolved into recurring roles, and eventually she landed a part that would define her public persona. Rachel Zane on the hit legal drama Suits. The show not only offered fame, but it also taught her the subtleties of public presentation, media interaction, and audience perception, skills that would become invaluable later in life. Every role, every interview, and every public appearance built her awareness of how people see her and how narratives are constructed around her. Yet Meghan's Hollywood presence was not merely about performance. It was also about visibility and advocacy. She championed causes, supported charities, and cultivated an image of someone deeply invested in social issues. While some critics dismissed these efforts as strategic, the truth is more nuanced. Meghan understood the interplay between public action and perception, between personal beliefs and public narrative. In Hollywood, every choice could be scrutinized, and every appearance could be interpreted through multiple lenses. This environment honed her awareness of optics, narrative control, and the delicate balance between private intention and public interpretation. It was within this context that Meghan navigated the social world that would eventually intersect with royalty. Events, parties, and networking opportunities were both opportunities for personal growth and stages for public perception. The yacht culture, in particular, was an arena where wealth, influence, and social strategy intertwined. Attending high-profile gatherings required not just social grace, but a deep understanding of image management. Every introduction, every handshake, every smile was a potential headline, a potential misstep, or a subtle signal. And Meghan, well-versed in managing both performance and perception, was not unaware of the stakes. But the stakes were not just social, they were personal. Meghan's life had already been subject to media scrutiny, public speculation, and the pressures of celebrity culture. Navigating this landscape demanded vigilance, strategy, and sometimes caution. The ability to interact gracefully while maintaining personal boundaries was crucial. In many ways, the skills she developed in Hollywood prepared her for the even more intense scrutiny that would follow in the palace. They also prepared her to navigate situations that, at first glance, might appear innocuous, but in reality carried layers of potential consequence, like socializing on a yacht with figures already steeped in controversy. And this is where the story becomes particularly interesting. The alleged yacht footage does not exist in a vacuum. It is not merely a video of two people in proximity. It is a moment where Meghan's early understanding of public perception meets the complex realities of elite social circles. The footage, according to sources, shows her interacting in ways that are unremarkable on the surface, yet in the context of her eventual royal life, every gesture, glance, and positioning becomes material for interpretation. What seemed casual in the moment becomes laden with narrative potential later, precisely because of who she would become. Consider the timing and setting. Yacht gatherings are spaces removed from public oversight, a combination of exclusivity and privacy that magnifies perception. In such settings, every interaction is subject to potential scrutiny if revealed later. Meghan, even before joining the royal family, would have been aware of this dynamic, understanding that social proximity can be misinterpreted, that gestures can be exaggerated, and that appearances can be manipulated into meaning beyond their intent. It is a world where optics matter as much as reality, where perception can become fact in the court of public opinion. Yet even with awareness, humans are fallible. Social interactions on a yacht are inherently unpredictable. Conversations shift, alliances form spontaneously, and the presence of cameras, even if unnoticed, can capture moments that alter narratives. For Meghan, these interactions, seemingly benign at the time, are now reframed under the lens of later events, royal scrutiny, and media amplification. The footage becomes a puzzle, a snapshot of her past that invites questions, speculation, and judgment. The complexity of perception is further amplified by Meghan's unique position. Unlike some celebrities, her transition into royalty was abrupt, highly visible, and heavily covered by media. This magnified everything about her past, making even minor interactions subject to retroactive interpretation. A social moment on a yacht becomes, in retrospect, a potential story of influence, proximity, and significance. The footage, whether intended to be revealing or not, gains weight simply because of the context into which Meghan eventually entered. And it's not just about what is visible in the footage, it's about how audiences interpret it. Human nature seeks patterns and meaning. Meghan's presence alongside Andrew, a figure already enmeshed in controversy, creates a natural tension. Observers naturally question motives, connections, and potential implications. The ambiguity is irresistible. It invites theory, debate, and speculation. It ensures that attention is focused not just on what occurred, but on what might have occurred and what it might mean now. What also makes this compelling is the convergence of two distinct worlds, Hollywood and royalty. Meghan's background in entertainment taught her the mechanics of public perception, but it did not insulate her from the intense judgment and speculation that accompanies royal life. The yacht becomes a symbolic bridge between these worlds. A private space that suddenly carries public weight. Every glance, every gesture, every interaction is now seen as part of a broader narrative about influence, alliances, and proximity. Moreover, Meghan's approach to social settings, poised, strategic, and aware of optics, may itself become part of interpretation. What might be intended as polite engagement can be recast as deliberate positioning. Her awareness of cameras and observers, combined with her understanding of media narratives, adds layers of complexity to any footage that emerges. Audiences may read meaning into intention, while intention itself may be entirely mundane. The tension between perception and reality is central to the story. Yet, the allure of speculation persists because humans crave understanding, particularly in ambiguous situations. Meghan's past, her rise to royalty, and her interactions with figures like Andrew combine to create a narrative rich in possibility. What was once a social gathering now functions as a point of inquiry, a subject for debate, and a catalyst for reaction. The footage becomes more than a recording. It becomes a lens through which the audience interprets personality, intent, and consequence. And so, as we examine Meghan Markle before the palace spotlight, we see the layers that contribute to the current intrigue. We see a woman who understood perception, navigated visibility, and cultivated an awareness of optics, yet whose past interactions are now scrutinized under a magnifying glass. The yacht footage captures a moment frozen in time, but its significance emerges only in the context of her later life, media interpretation, and public fascination. As we move forward, the next chapter will explore the reactions that followed the emergence of the footage, the urgent calls, the media frenzy, and the alleged attempts at narrative control that demonstrate just how high the stakes became. Because what happened after the footage surfaced would escalate the story beyond speculation into an unfolding drama of urgency, strategy, and unprecedented attention. Imagine the world shifting in a single instant. A private moment, frozen on camera, suddenly becomes the focus of scrutiny, speculation, and potential scandal. That is exactly what allegedly happened when the yacht footage surfaced. Behind the glossy headlines and social media buzz, panic set in, urgent, palpable, and strategic. According to sources, both Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, or their representatives, reached out to key players in the media and investigative world, trying to manage, mitigate, or perhaps even suppress the narrative before it could spiral out of control. To understand the gravity of these reactions, it is crucial to grasp what was at stake. For public figures, particularly those with histories as scrutinized as Meghan and Andrew, perception is power. Every gesture, every association, every frame captured on film has the potential to redefine public understanding. The alleged footage, even if it merely depicted a casual social interaction, was interpreted, or feared to be interpreted, as a flashpoint for controversy. That perception alone triggered action. Panic is not always about the content of what is seen. Often, it is about the implications, assumptions, and potential fallout that could follow. Sources suggest that the first reactions were private, urgent, and precise. Messages were sent, calls were made, and advisors were consulted. The goal was clear: contain the story before it reached wider public consciousness. Reports indicate that the parties involved were aware of Tom Bower's reputation, the investigative biographer whose work is meticulous, credible, and often explosive. Bower does not rely on rumors. His findings are sourced, verified, and methodically constructed. Knowing that, it is easy to understand why representatives would act swiftly. The perception of threat, combined with Bower's credibility, created a sense of urgency that few could ignore. What is fascinating about this scenario is the dual nature of panic. On one hand, it is personal. The individuals involved are concerned about their reputations, their legacies, and the potential interpretations of their actions. On the other hand, it is strategic. Reputations are not managed in isolation. They are managed publicly, with careful consideration of media framing, narrative control, and audience reaction. Panic, in this context, is both emotional and calculated. It drives immediate action while also shaping long-term strategy. Consider the psychological impact. Human beings are wired to react when faced with potential exposure. Even a minor detail, a fleeting frame, or an ambiguous interaction can trigger heightened awareness, defensive communication, and urgent decision-making. For Meghan and Andrew, the alleged footage was not just an image. It was a trigger, a catalyst for action. It demanded attention, assessment, and response. The panic that followed is as much a part of the story as the footage itself. According to sources, the reactions involved multiple channels. Legal advisors were consulted, public relations teams were mobilized, and media operatives were engaged. Every step was designed to gauge risk, control perception, and manage potential fallout. Messages were reportedly crafted with precision, emphasizing context, mitigating interpretation, and sometimes attempting to preempt media framing. This is not merely rumor. It is standard practice for high-profile individuals navigating potential crises.